Performer Power Pendulum, or PePe, was the shortest lived tier 0 deck in Yu-Gi-Oh history, and I got 4 cards banned: Damage Juggler, Plushfire, Ptolemaeus, and Wavering Eyes, as well as 6 cards limited: Ignister Prominence, Luster Pendulum, Monkey Board, and Skullcrobat Joker. Those last 2 would later on to go be banned. So why'd they get banned? Pendulum had a very strange introduction into Yu-Gi-Oh! With the sole exception of Klee, Pendulum decks were severely underpowered. That is until late 2015 with the release of Perform Mage Plushfire and Skullcrobat Joker. Up to this point, the Perform Mages were just generic extenders that slotted into rank 4 decks, but now their own archetype actually had something to work with. Plushfire got to summon a Perform Mage from deck not once per turn when it's destroyed, something Pendulum decks loved doing, and Joker search any Perform Power, which would create a deck that could not only spell rank 4s like Ptolemaeus and Abyss Dweller, but synchros like Ignister Prominence. The deck was already powerful, but received even more support at the start of 2016. The deck got Monkey Board, who is a scale that searched another scale, Drake of Face Off, who is more consistency, as well as Cyber Dragon Infinity, giving Ptolemaeus something even better to go into. It would be the best deck in the format by a mile, however, it would only be played at one event. Konami will create an adjusted list, which is just a ban list that locals didn't have to abide by, and it would completely cripple the deck. Once the actual ban list came out a few months later, the deck would be completely destroyed. So what happened? Every card is now a 3, and they're all bad. Plushfire became once per turn, Monkey Board isn't special anymore, Damage Juggler is too slow, Wavering Eyes needs too much setup, and Ptolemaeus takes too much investment. Dark Strike Fighter is a generic level 7 synchro that contributes a monster to burn the opponent for 200 times its level, not once per turn. So why did it get banned? Surprisingly, not because of FDKs. DSF was released in 2009 and would see play for the same reason Gaga Got Cowboy saw play. You would attack with all your monsters, synchro into DSF, then just tribute your field for game. What made it even crazier was that Dark Strike Fighter could tribute itself, meaning if it attacked, it dealt 4,000 damage alone. Lots of decks would make use of this, Blackwing and Rescue Cat decks mostly, but anything that can make a level 7 synchro benefited from playing it. It made these already aggressive decks unbeatable, so it would be banned only 6 months after release. So what happened? Dark Strike Fighter received one of the most crippling erratas a card could get. First, you could only use the effect once per turn. Makes sense, not sure why it wasn't there before. But the craziest change was that it could only use its effect in main phase 1. This meant you could no longer use it after you battled. The card would have already been bad with the once per turn restriction, but the phase 1-2 was way too much. Trishula is a generic level 9 synchro that needs 3 monsters, 2 tuners and a non-tuner. I mean, it does say it on screen, but for those of you tabbed out, I said it backwards. It's only 1 tuner and 2 non-tuners. On summon, it banishes a card from the opponent's field, grave, and a random one from hand, not once per turn. So why did it get banned? Trishula is one of the most iconic synchro monsters, and that's mostly due to its strength. Despite the fact that it took 3 monsters to make, it would see play in almost every deck that could theoretically make it. Its effect was so powerful because unlike many big synchros where you needed them to stick around for their value, Trish did it all on summon. However, its lack of a once per turn restriction would prove troublesome immediately. Decks like Infernity, TG, and Plants could also have multiple Trishulas to rip multiple cards out of the opponent's hand. This would get the card limited after only a few months, but it wouldn't stay there for long. Even at 1, the same synchro decks would find ways to loop Trishula upwards of 6 times to essentially insta-win, since they would lose their entire hand and field and most of their graveyard. This would get Trishula banned in 2012, though notably well after it was actually meta. It would get a preemptive hit at the start of Master Rule 5, but has now been unlimited since 2022. So what happened? A generic sync with a non-once return hand rip is very powerful, it's why Omega is limited, but there's a big difference between 2 material and 3. Decks can loop Trishula, but if you really want a hand loop, there are better cards available that are still rogue at best. Time Steal is a normal trap that skips your opponent's next draw phase. So why did it get banned? Time Steal is probably the worst card to have ever been banned in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because you draw immediately at the start of your turn, you have to time steal preemptively to actually skip the next turn. And if you were going first, the first turn you'd be able to skip is the opponent's second turn, since there's no chance you could use the card before their first draw phase. In the TCG, this card would see very little play before its ban, and that's because in the OCG, this card was being played in Victory Dragon decks. Basically, they would loop Time Steal and drop off with Mask of Darkness and Tsukiyomi to stall until you could summon Victory Dragon. While it was only okay, it was incredibly toxic. This would get Time Steal banned in the OCG, and since we shared a ban list, it would be banned here too. It would stay banned for 16 years before getting limited in 2022 and unlimited in 2024. So what happened? This card was never really good. It only saw play in 1 deck, and even then it was very fragile. No clue why it was banned for so long. The individual effects of all these monsters don't matter. All that does matter is that Steam the Cloak, Jet Synchron, and Glow Up Ball were all 1-card Halq Fibraxes. Destructor was a very searchable tuner that could summon itself from grave, and O-Line was the best target to summon off Halq since it could summon a token when it left the field, and it was a machine for Auroradon. So why'd they get banned? If you're unaware, Halq Fibrax was a link monster that took any monster plus a tuner, and it summoned a level 3 or lower tuner from deck. It was also one of the strongest combo enablers of all time. The only issue is that it needed a tuner, and most non-synchro decks didn't have access to them. That's where these guys came in. They summoned Halq all on their own, and if you instead just summon them off Halq, they turned a Link 2 into a super easy Link 4 because they replaced themselves in some way, either with themselves or a token. Destructor was different because it wasn't a 1-card Halq, but it was a generically good card that was very searchable and made Halq way more accessible. These cards would be picked off in 2020, and most would return shortly after Halq's ban in 2022, except Glow Up Bulb. That one took a while. So what happened? Aside from Destructor, these cards were just okay by themselves. Since coming back, the only ones to see play were Jet Synchron and Destructor. The real problem was obviously Halq, and it took Konami a while to figure it out. Lunalight Tiger is a level 4 pendulum monster. It's a level 3. With the pendulum effect, Reborn to Lunalight is a soft once per turn, and a monster effect, Reborn to Lunalight, when it's destroyed, is a hard once per turn. Fun ruling, because pendulum monsters make perfect sense, if Tiger is popped in the scales, it triggers its monster effect to float. So why did it get banned? Tiger was a very strong enabler for an OTK deck that never was. Aside from a small stint in Zodiac, Lunalight wouldn't see real success until it got a few pieces of additional support. It would be mostly played as an OTK deck that meshed well with other decks like Orcust and Phantom Knights. They also helped summon Azathoth a lot easier. However, they would become a huge problem once once Master Rule 4 ended. You see, Lunalight had received many powerful non-once return cards with no locks on them, and now that you didn't need links to summon extra deck monsters, Lunalight was able to spam out lots of bodies that could all be turned into all sorts of degenerate stuff. This card got banned in April 2020, would stay banned for 2 years before getting limited in 2022 and be unlimited by 2024. So what happened? The main reason Tiger isn't broken anymore is because all the stupid Exceed monsters it facilitated are banned now. It currently still sees play in Lunalight, which has been a decent rogue deck for a while now. Eba's a generic level 5 tuner synchro that can use a World Chalice normal monster as a tuner. On summon it as a World Legacy card, and when it's sent to grave, it summons a World Chalice monster from deck or grave. So why did it get banned? Eba's one of the few synchro monsters who was actually designed with Master Rule 4 in mind. She was meant to be used as a link climbing tool that wouldn't occupy your EMZ for too long. Decks would play Draconet, which could summon Galaxy Serpent from the deck, which allowed anything to include this little package to instantly make material for a potential Link 4. The deck to mainly use it would be Dragon Link. They would add World Legacy Guard Dragon to Reborn, Link off for a Link 2, summon World Chalice Guard Dragon off Ebe, Link for Striker, Guard Dragon, Reborn to summon LP, and from there you could do pretty much anything. This would get the card banned in 2020, it would stay banned for 3 years before fully coming to 3 in 2024. So what happened? Power creep is very real. This thing just takes too many garnets to work. It saw some play in Generator, but that deck was never close to meta. Archetypes just have their own better versions nowadays. Ancient Fairy Dragon is a generic level 7 synchro that can summon a level 4 lower monster from hand and destroy field spells to gain life and add another. Both were soft once returns. So why did it get banned? AFD was decidedly mid on release. Its summon from hand effect was nice, but no one cared about popping a field spell to search like Sogen. But as field spells became stronger and stronger in the coming years, AFD got stronger with them. It was playable in pretty much any deck that needed a field spell, but by far the biggest buff was release of Destrudo. Destrudo combined with any level 6 or lower monster made any level 7 synchro, and since Destrudo could summon itself from grave, it paired very well with the field spell Dragon Ravine. So you could use Ravine to dump Destrudo, Destrudo Reborn to make AFD, then have AFD pop the Ravine to search any field spell and get a monster out of the hand. This would be played mostly in Spiral, a deck that has a field spell with a soft once per turn search. There were also some really bad FTKs going around, so the card would be banned in May 2018 to stop all of it. So what happened? AFD got errata and is actually not butchered. They just made both effects hard once per turn and stop you from adding the same field spell you pop. It hasn't seen much success yet, but I wouldn't write it off for good. Kirin is a level 6 pendulum monster that, as a quick effect, can bounce both a pendulum monster you control and a monster your opponent controls. Also, it cannot be targeted or destroyed by card effects. So why did it get banned? Kirin was released back in 2015, and it would take until 2016 for the card to really see play, due to a sort of PePe related problem at the time, but after that was dealt with, Kirin would slot into most pendulum decks. It functioned as both removal when going second as well as an interruption when going first, and since it could bounce itself back every turn, you could keep on pen summoning it for a super sticky piece of removal. If you remember DPE, imagine that but in 2016. It would get limited soon after and would stay there for about a year before getting banned in 2017. It would stay banned for 7 years before coming back to 3 in 2024. So what happened? This card was banned for way too long. Kirin could have probably come back in like 2020 and been bad, but by 2024 there was no hope. Thankfully there's a retrain coming out that is just an upgraded Kirin. D-Mok is a level 8 monster that adds back a spell card on summon, not once per turn. Also, it banishes anything it destroys by battle and banishes itself if it would leave the field. So why did it get banned? D-Mok was released all the way back in 2004 and it was very good. This was still at a point when Magician of Faith was a broken card, so something that could add back spells without needing to wait a turn was incredible. The only issue is that it was a level 8 monster with no built-in summoning condition. This meant it would only see play in decks that could cheat it out, and there were a lot of decks that could do that. Magical Scientist FTK, Reasoning Gate, any deck with Dimension Fusion, and especially Dad decks. Now, not a single one of these decks is aiming to do anything fair. They all use D-Mok to loop their most broken spell over and over again. And while most of the spells it was looping were problems in their own right, Konami decided to ban D-Mok alongside them just in case. It was banned for 8 years before coming back in 2016. So what happened? A bad errata is what happened. Now you only get to add the spell in the end phase on top of a hard once per turn. An effect so slow wouldn't even be good in GOAT format. Without the errata, this card would likely still be banned, but let the boy keep his legacy. Goyo Guardian was a generic level 6 synchro with 2800 attack, and when it destroyed something by battle, you could resummon the monster for yourself in defense position. So why did it get banned? Goyo was arguably the strongest synchro of its era. A level 6 synchro with 2800 attack kind of broke the mechanic out the gate. First off, a level 6 synchro is one of the easiest levels to make. Since level 3 and 4 are the most common levels and most of the good tuners were level 2 or 3, making 6s was very easy. And being able to airdrop a 2800 attack monster out of nowhere was very strong and could threaten pretty much any board. Since 2800 is more attack than most level 8 synchros, its actual effect was good too. It punished setting monster with graveyard effects like Necro Gardener or Vayu, and stealing a Stardust was broken. It would be limited in 2009, then banned in 2011, just because its existence invalidated so many other synchros. It would stay banned for 3 years before getting unbanned in 2014 and unlimited in 2015. So what happened? Goyo being a big beater just wasn't useful by 2014, when people were busy milling 3 with Dante and Shadolf using it to construct. But for some strange reason, the OCG was very scared of this card. They had it banned until 2017, and when they finally did unban it, they errated it to require an Earth tuner. Now, it's not like this errata is keeping the card from seeing play, it would be bad regardless, but it just makes using it in retro formats more annoying. Sinister Serpent is a level 1 monster that adds itself from grave to hand during your standby phase, not once per return. So why did it get banned? Sinister Serpent is a very old promo card from 2003, and it would see play in most decks. You see, in old Yu-Gi-Oh, there were a lot of powerful cards that needed discards, and players gravitated towards any card that can make paying the cost easier. Cards like Thunder Dragon saw success solely for the reason it was a free discard. Sinister Serpent was used for the same purpose. It could be discarded every turn to allow you to never truly lose any advantage. It would be limited very quickly and stay that way for a few years before getting banned in 2005. It would stay banned for 10 years before getting limited in 2015 and unlimited later that year. So what happened? This card has aged horribly. Not only is discarding not a big deal anymore, in many cases it's an upside. However, Konami decided to errata the card anyway. Not only is it a hard once per turn, it's effectively a once every other turn, since if you use it 2 turns in a row, it banishes itself. This effect would have been bad in Edison, so there's no shot it will be played in 2015. BLS is a level 8 monster that can summon itself from hand by banishing a light and dark monster from grave. It can banish a monster your opponent controls, but it can't attack that turn, and if it destroys something by battle, it can attack again. So why did it get banned? BLS was released in 2004 alongside the rest of the Chaos monsters, and while it couldn't hold a candle to Emperor Dragon, it was without a doubt the second best card. It effectively had 2 forms of removal. You could just banish something, but you could also run 2 things over by battle, which wasn't hard to do with its insane 3000 attack. The double attack was also very good at finishing games. While you weren't likely gonna OTK, you could easily do tons of damage off of a guy you just summoned for free. It would be limited after only a month and banned later that year. It just did too much for 2005. It was stay banned for 6 years before getting limited in 2011, summoned in 2017, and unlimited in 2018. So what happened? BLS being limited in 2011 was a huge deal. It was a bomb of a card and would often clean up any game it was summoned. It would continue to see regular play up until 2016. This is around the point BLS finally got power crept 12 years later. Decks started needing quick effects and OTKs weren't difficult to do anymore. While its status no longer good, it had one hell of a run. Lithosagym is a level 9 earthworm that can destroy 2 monsters in your hand, including an earth, to summon itself. And if both destroyed monsters were earth, it can look at your opponent's extra deck and rip 3 cards with different names. So why did it get banned? The True Kings were released in 2017 and weren't really a deck. They were seemingly meant to be free agents for various attribute decks, but most of them never took off, except for Litho. Litho is the main True King in True King Dino, a powerful deck from 2017. Dino was a deck that loved popping babies. The only problem was that often the babies get stuck in your hand with no way to pop them. That's where Draconic Diagram came in. Diagram could pop a baby out of your hand to add a True King, and often the True King you added was Litho. If Litho was able to pop 2 babies, the game was frequently over, because not only would you get to summon 2 from deck, you would also get to rip apart your opponent's extra deck. Litho would be banned after only 7 months, which is very fast, especially given the format. It would stay banned for 3 years before going to 1 in 2020 and 3 in 2023. So what happened? Litho's extra deck grip is still very strong. The issue is it's a 3-card combo just to summon it, and if you aren't popping Earths with destruction effects, it's super negative. Yeah, Scrap Raptor wouldn't trigger here. I just put it here because it's an Earth monster with a destruction effect. The card just takes too much investment for something Kashtira Unicorn can do for free. Makyura is a dark warrior that, when it's sent to grave from anywhere, allowed you to activate trap cards from your hand for the turn, as many as you wanted. So why did it get banned? Makyura was one of the most broken DM cards ever. On average, traps had stronger effects than spells, but were balanced around the fact they had to be set for a turn. Makyura completely broke this and led to some insane combos. If you ever heard about Chick the Yellow getting banned, 1, you were lied to, it was only ever semi-limited, and 2, it was because of Makyura. Chick the Yellow bounces a card if it deals damage, so if you have Makyura's effect live, Chick and grave, and call the haunted, you could call for Chick, Chick attack and bounce call, destroying Chick, and then repeat until the opponent lost. Makyura would actually be banned in the OCG due to a combo with Exchange of the Spirit like an FDK by milling your opponent's entire deck before their turn started. Makyura will be banned in 2005 in the TCG before Exchange was released, and it would be unbanned in 2020. So what happened? Makyura received a very harsh errata. Now it has to be sent to grave from field, and you only get 1 trap activation. I don't see the point of this errata. The card hasn't seen play and likely never will, so why even bother unbanning it? Rescue Cat is a level 4 beast that can send itself from field to grave to summon 2 level 3 or lower beasts from deck and destroy them in the end phase. Not once per turn. So why did it get banned? Rescue Cat was released in 2005 and surprisingly wouldn't see much success historically. That goat deck was a more recent creation. The first time this card would see major success was in Gladiator Beast as a way to cheat out Test Tiger and actually make proactive plays. Its next home would be in Dark Strike Fighter decks. This often involved Cat summoning 2 X-Saber or Bellum who not only hit for 3200, they ripped apart the opponent's hand, then could just be synced off into various things, but most often Strike Fighter who could easily burn for game. Cat's final home was an X-Saber. Dark Soul was a crazy card that gets searched in the end phase, but was also a good non-tuner. This let Cat become a 1-card synchro for stuff like Brio and Goyo and would be what got Cat banned in 2010. It would stay banned for 7 years before getting limited in 2017, then unlimited later that year. So what happened? Rescue Cat got an errata that honestly isn't that bad, and negates the monster summoned and is a hard once per turn. Cat saw play in Tri-Brigade as an additional normal summon and also has an extra beast to banish. It hasn't seen much play since, but it definitely isn't a bad card and could likely see play again. Disc Commander is a dark warrior that, when it's summoned from the graveyard, draws 2 cards, not once per turn. So why did it get banned? Disc Commander was a promo card released in 2007, and it wouldn't take long to see play. If there's 2 things Yu-Gi-Oh players love, it's drawing cards and not once per turn effects, and this guy does both. It was easy to send this card to grave with stuff like Armageddon Knight and Dark Grepher, and once it was in grave, it turned all your revival effects into revival effects that were also Pot of Greed. It mainly saw play in Dark Arm Dragon decks with a large Destiny Hero package. This deck would use the Destiny Heroes as the Dark Engine to fuel deck. bad. Using Allure of Darkness, Destiny Draw, and Disc Commander, the deck had an insane amount of draw power, allowing it to easily set up for big lethal pushes with cards like Dimension Fusion in return from the different dimension. This would get the card banned in 2008. It would stay banned for 10 years before getting unlimited in 2018. So what happened? Disc Commander got an insane errata. Now the card not only can't be summoned to turn it sent to grave, it's a once per duel effect now. I don't even think the original effect would be that broken in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Hero is bad for several reasons, and none of them are that they don't draw enough cards. And this card requires too many hoops to be used generically. Insane errata. Exciton Knight is a generic rank 4 requiring 2 4s. Once per chain, so not once per turn. As a quick effect, if your opponent has more total cards in their hand and field than you do, you can detach to destroy all of their cards on field. Then your opponent takes no damage for the rest of the turn. So why did it get banned? Exciton Knight was released in 2014 and would completely change the game. There were strong board-breaking Xyz monsters, but none as strong as this. It punished players who overextended and gave players who were far behind a chance to get back into the game. It's basically a power-crept version of Black Rose Dragon. It being a quick effect was also a huge deal, because not only could you use the effect immediately, you could bank the second effect for later. Exciton will be banned in late 2015. This was a huge ban list that completely wiped out the meta, and Exciton was banned alongside it. It would stay banned for 3 years before being limited in 2018 and unlimited in 2019. So what happened? There's an argument Exciton never should have been banned in the first place, but Exciton was able to see play after its unbanning. Assuming you didn't get FDK'd, Exciton was decent against most decks, though it did struggle to play through negates, which led it to fall out of favor, especially once Zeus came out in 2020. Though it did manage to see play in Ryzeal as both a breaker and a light fiend for Fiendsmith, and Branded Dracotail is a great card for the mirror. Exchange of the Spirit is a normal trap that, if you have 15 cards in your graveyard, forces both players to swap their decks with their graveyards. So why did it get banned? FTKs, yeah! Well, only if you lived in Japan. You see, in the TCG, this card was never anything more than a gimmick, since its supporting cards were either not out or already banned. It was released as a sneak peek card in 2005, but would actually be release limited. This is because the TCG and OCG shared a ban list at the time, and since the OCG got cards earlier, sometimes they would already be limited or even banned. And the OCG Exchange was released in 2001, it wouldn't take long to see play. The deck paired Exchange with Makyura the Destructor, who let you activate traps from your hand and hit the grave to mill your opponent before their turn started. Since only you needed to have 15 cards in grave, the rest of the deck was just draw spells and cards that cycled themselves. The high roll combo could get 15 cards in grave, including Makyura, to FTK, but since the game was so slow, you could take a few turns to actually do the combo in OTK. This would get Makyura banned, but Exchange would still be playable with Temple of the Kings, which does basically the same thing. That would finally get Exchange banned in March 2006 in the OCG and April 2006 in the TCG. It would stay banned for 9 years before going to 1 in 2015 and unlimited later that year. So what happened? Exchange got an errata that it should have had to begin with. Now both players have to have 15 cards in grave. But by 2015, the card was unplayable. Maybe in another universe, this is how the card was printed and it saw play in old control decks, but alas. Super Rejuvenation is a quick play spell that draws a card for each dragon you discarded or tributed during the turn in the end phase, not once per turn. So why did it get banned? Rejuve was released back in 2003 and wouldn't see much play. Yes, it could theoretically draw you an infinite amount of cards, but there just wasn't a deck that could consistently discard enough dragons to make the card worth it. That is until 2013. That was the release of the Dragon Rulers. They were a series of dragons that all had strong effects that require you to discard dragons, so it wasn't crazy to have Super Rejuvenation draw you 4 to 6 cards, which could then draw you into more Super Rejuvenations to draw you another 4 to 6 cards. And since the Dragon Rulers loved being in the grave, you were more than happy to discard them to hand size. The Dragon Rulers were already bordering on tier 0, but Super Rejuve just pushed it over the edge. Games were decided on who resolved it first. It was banned in 2013 and would stay banned for 6 years before getting unlimited in 2019. So what happened? Rejuve can still draw you tons of cards, and there are even better ways to discard a massive amount of dragons, but the fact you draw in the end phase completely kills it. Rank Up Magic Argent Chaos Force is a normal spell whose rank up effect is actually not relevant to it getting banned. The effect that is relevant is if a rank 5 or higher Xyz monster is summoned while it's in grave, it adds itself to hand once per duel. So why did it get banned? Argent Chaos Force was released in 2014 and, like most rank up spells, wouldn't be very good. That is until, wow, no way, 2018! Now at this time, Beatrice, a generic rank 6 who can dump any card, Utopic Zexal, an Xyz monster who can be ranked up over any Utopia by discarding a rank up spell and stops the opponent from activating card effects, and Electromite, the card that made Pendulum consistent, were all legal at the same time. The combo involved using Beatrice to send Argent Chaos Force, then ranking Beatrice up into Gaia Charger to trigger Chaos Force to add back, then just make Utopia, discard the Chaos Force, and boom, kinda FTK. The only deck to be able to do this consistently was Pendulum Magician thanks to the newly released Electromite. This deck wouldn't get Beatrice banned, it wouldn't get Utopic Zexal banned, it wouldn't get Electromite banned, no, it would get the rank up spell that was only ever discarded banned in 2018. It would stay banned for 3 years before coming to 3 in 2021. So what happened? Utopic Zexal got banned. That's what happened. The card did see play in 2024 with Gimmick Weapon FTK, so there's that. Snatch Steal is an equip spell that must be equipped to an opponent's monster, and when it is, it takes control of that monster. And during the opponent's standby phase, they gain 1,000 life points. So why did it get banned? Snatch Steal was released in 2002, and because the OCG and TCG shared a ban list, would be released limited. The card would obviously still be broken to see play in tons of decks. It had largely the same uses as Change of Heart, but its steal being permanent meant it was better at stealing monsters with good effects, and it was also a much better tempo swing. But the fact that it relied on an equip spell being on field meant it had counterplay that Change of Heart didn't, and because equips can't target face down monsters, it couldn't take flips. But stealing monsters in OLD Yugioh was so strong that Snatch Steal would be banned in 2006, randomly unbanned in 2007, rebanned 2 lists later where it would stay for 7 years before randomly being unbanned again in 2015. It was just as broken as last time, and we banned on the next list. It would stay banned for the next 8 years before going to 1 in 2024 and unlimited in 2026. So what happened? This type of effect just isn't as broken as it used to be. Stealing cards are way more matchup specific now. I have a feeling this card will be good one day, just not right now. Super Poly is a quick play spell that, for a discard, can perform a fusion summon using monsters from either player's field. Also, neither player can respond to the card. So why did it get banned? Super Poly was released all the way back in 2008, and it saw very little play. Despite the card being soul exchange on steroids, there weren't any generic fusion monsters to summon with it. This led the card to fall into relative obscurity for a while. That is until 2014 with Shadal. Shadal was the first good fusion deck to make use of semi-generic fusion monsters, all of them just taking a Shadal plus a monster of a specific attribute, with their best fusions requiring a light, dark, and earth respectively, which just so happened to line up very well against the best decks of the format. This let Shadal use Super Poly to turn any of their monsters plus any opponent's monster into one of their several boss monsters. This would get the card limited then banned in 2015. It would stay banned for 3 years before coming to 1 in 2018, 2 in 2019, and 3 later that year. So what happened? Super Poly is actually much stronger than when it was banned. Newer fusion monsters have gotten much more generic, so there are way more options to use now, some of which are seemingly made for it. Fun fact, Mudragon was released the set before Super Poly was unbanned. The inability to respond to it is frustrating, but nowadays, at least in my opinion, it's not much worse than getting your board Regeki'd. Temple of the Kings is a continuous spell that let you activate traps the turn they were set as long as it was on field. So why did it get banned? FTKs! Yeah! Temple of the Kings would be released in the OCG in 2001. It would see play for the same reason Makyura did. Activating traps the turn they were set is very strong. The best one was Exchange of the Spirit. Exchange can mill your opponent's entire deck before their first turn if, on the first turn of the duel, you had 15 cards at grave and could activate it on your own turn. This combo was pretty consistent due to all the draw spells legal at the time and would get both Makyura and Exchange of the Spirit banned. Temple of the Kings would get banned on the next list for some reason. This happened in 2006. However, at the time, this card was not yet released in the TCG. Up until 2013, the TCG and OCG shared a ban list, and since Temple was banned in the OCG, that meant when it finally did release in the TCG in 2010, it was already banned, and it would stay banned until 2015, which meant that the first time this card was playable in the TCG was in 2015, despite initially releasing in 2001. So what happened? This card got an errata. Now you can only activate one trap the turn it's set. This effectively killed the card and stopped it from seeing much play, though it has seen play in some Apophis decks since they can search it, so that's neat.